Welcome back to another episode of Pokemon Knowledge. On today's episode, I want to do something kind of fun, kind of exciting, where I was going to say, in a hypothetical situation, what if I just started from scratch? I still had all the knowledge that I have about different cards, different sets, but my collection was just completely gone and I started from scratch. And honestly, I couldn't formulate that video. I couldn't figure out how the heck I would do it. So then it kind of segued a little bit and, transformed into, okay, what would it be like to be a new collector in the hobby? Because I've said it in so many videos that a lot of the demand, a lot of the hype, a lot of the, especially the money coming into the hobby right now is all coming from a lot of new collectors. But then I had to think to myself, what does that even mean? I've said that so many times, but what does that mean? And then I thought about it even longer. And honestly, I don't even know. And maybe that should be the title of this video. The title of this video maybe should be I don't know, because I'm going to say I don't know because I don't have a lot of these answers. It's going to be strictly speculation. It's just going to be opinion based. And, that's the truth, because when I think of new collectors, I tried to put myself in their shoes, and maybe some of you guys out there are newer collectors or people that have re-entered the hobby after a really long time. So I got to ask the question, how did you do it? Because every time I try to take myself out of my situation now and look at it from the outside looking in, I can't do it. And I don't know why. Why am I racking my brain? Why is it so hard for me to imagine what it would be like just re-entering this hobby? And every time I think about it, it's such an immense hobby that I couldn't even imagine doing it. Because if you're going to look at the hobby from the outside looking in, I really broke it down to 5 different categories. And it's really hard to break Pokemon down to 5 different categories, because it is so inclusive and there's so much. But really, I thought about Pokemon. If you were to look at it just from the outside looking in, re-entering the hobby, you would probably see it as modern, vintage, graded cards, sealed cards, and then just Japanese cards. And that would be an entire, subset. Yeah, you can do all 4 of the previous categories, lump that together with Japanese, but that's just what I thought. Like, if I were to break it up, it would just be those 5 categories. But I don't know where people would really want to attack first. And then the more I thought about it, the more it just started to explain what was going on with this market. Because if you were going to attack the hobby as a newer collector, somebody reinvesting, you're probably more likely than not going to really attack 2 to 3 areas. One, you're going to attack modern, because modern is readily available. And, I mean readily available, yeah. Is it hard to find it on shelves, especially a few months ago? Yes. But if you wanted to go online, and yeah, you maybe would have to pay a little bit of a premium, but you could get it, and you could get it easily. And not only could you get it easily, you can get a lot of it for really cheap. You can go out, for a lot of these booster boxes, you can spend on the high end for a lot of these booster boxes. And I'm talking top dollar for what I would pay. The $120, $130 for these booster boxes at release. Don't ever do that. I always recommend trying to get them at 90 to 100, but I'm just looking at it. If you were just strictly a new collector, the entry point is so low to start ripping packs. So that would be the first place people would go, would be modern. Then you'd really start to look at vintage stuff, because that's probably what you're most familiar with. Where you fall within that vintage set, it's hard to say. It's probably more on a person-to-person basis. But the third place you would probably go is wherever the hype was. And when you think about, well, where was the hype recently? Well, the hype recently was really, Shadowless First Edition base set. That's where it was. Sure, a lot of Logan Paul, maybe he had a bit of influence for it, but at the same time, everyone used that as a baseline to justify so many different price increases across so many different subsections of the hobby across the board. And I think that's really where we saw a lot of people come in. And I think about, well, what is my weakest points in the hobby? Where I really am weakest is a lot of the diamond and pearl stuff. Just, I would say probably from diamond and pearl all the way to the Arceus, because those were just sets that I didn't heavily open. I wasn't really around in the hobby then, because what is that, 2006 to like 2010, 2009? Those were the years I was in college. I was a broke college kid. I wasn't going out spending a bunch of money on Pokemon cards. That was probably the least of my worries. And so that's definitely the area of the hobby that I am weakest in. And I definitely, when it comes to set knowledge, I'm very weak there. I have a little bit of knowledge about Secret Wonders because I did make a video a while back on Secret Wonders, but that's what I just think about. So I'm trying again, guys. I'm trying to talk about this as if I could pull myself out of where I am in the hobby right now and just look at it from the outside looking in. And if I were new to this hobby or returning, the one thing you would really want is, yes, you would want the cards, but you would also want the info. And when I say you would want the info, I mean you would want to start absorbing as much information as you can. Just like any hobby, anytime you're doing anything, if you get into something enough, you want to absorb as much information as possible. So I do believe that one of the, probably the first places you're going to look would be YouTube. And that's where it gets a little tricky too for new collectors. Because when you do look for YouTube channels, when you're searching Pokemon, until you really start to dive deep down that rabbit hole and start to get recommendations through the YouTube algorithm and all this stuff, like, I'm going to let you guys all know right now. If you're listening to this video, you have really jumped down that rabbit hole pretty deep to get to my channel. But you probably had to watch hundreds of videos in order for the YouTube algorithm to suggest my channel to you guys. And that's just the truth. So if you are new to the hobby and just jumping back in, I don't even know like what a YouTube search, if you just typed in Pokemon cards, what would be the top videos. But I have a good understanding. I'm sure it'd be like the Leonhardt videos, the Real Breakin' Nate videos, like those type of videos. And they're the feel-good type channels, and it's definitely something Pokemon needs, those pack break-in, well-edited, hype videos. Get super excited about opening packs, super excited about cards, like, you got Real Breakin' Nate, like, sending in positive vibes, and you got Leonhardt. But see, there's like a little, I don't know how to say it. When you watch their videos, you do understand that they're so smart. Not just smart at what they do, meaning how they edit their videos and how they're able to portray information, how they're able to act excited, because there is like a bit of acting that goes on in there. Obviously, Leonhardt really being, the poster child for that is the acting. But when you really start to peel back the layers on their videos, and it's hard because there is so much of like that positivity and stuff, you can start to pull out pieces when you really start to understand how knowledgeable those guys are of the true market. They really do understand prices. They really do understand sets. They understand demand. They understand like a lot of the, I don't know, like the economics that are behind Pokemon cards. Leonhardt, there's a reason why he has dollars in all his videos because he's not stupid. Yeah, he's excited and he portrays this character, but when you really break it down for these guys, they're not dumb. So you could potentially, if you watched enough of those videos, start to absorb a little bit of that, you know, call it financial knowledge, or, maybe they allow you to start to get to those next levels of starting to question a lot of the things you guys probably already know by now. And then that's when you start to get to some of the channels that are more like money based. They really start to talk about the dollars, like you start to get to the SM Pratts and you start to get to those guys. But then when you get to those guys, it's tricky too. Because the reason why it's tricky is because you got some of the smartest people in the hobby who are giving out some information, but the problem is the information that they give is watered down. And when I say it's watered down, it means that you have people who are so ingrained in the hobby, have so much information at their, just call it beck and call. At any point, they're full of so much just raw knowledge. But the reason why it's watered down is because by the time that that information makes it to you as a listener through YouTube, it's already been watered down through a lot of different channels or different Patreons or stuff like that. And the reason a lot of that information gets filtered is just because a lot of these guys, they do make money on Patreon. Their knowledge, their time is very valuable to a lot of people in the hobby. So I'm not knocking them by any sense of the imagination. I'm just letting you guys know that if you were a new person entering this hobby, these would be the roadblocks you would probably start to experience if you really were to look at a lot of these channels. Like, sure, you can watch as much information as you can and you could hear, I don't know, SM Pratt talk about like Illustrated Charizard or something like that, like super hyped cards already. By the time that information made it out to anybody, that information had already, gone through so many different areas of the hobby, so many different groups. Like, it was very valuable information for a lot of people. Extremely valuable. It was a very easy card for a lot of people to go after. But it was watered down. It was filtered by the time it got to anybody. So you get to points where you start to like listen to this stuff, and if you have any kind of brain, you start to realize what's really going on. And then there's a lot of different other YouTube channels out there, and the information could all be the same in a way. It's all speculation, right? But at the same time, like, you start to realize like how much information is really being held back and how much information is not actually out there, and the extreme lack of transparency that there really, really is in the Pokemon hobby. And I hate to say that, and I'm sure there was a long time, and I feel like I still do it sometimes by accident, but there's definitely so much gatekeeping that happens in the Pokemon hobby. Even like some of the channels out there that are really, really, really trying to help people, they gatekeep by accident, or they gatekeep purposely, or, you'll hear them come pretty much straight out and say, that's a great question, but that's a Patreon question, Like, you'll hear people just flat out tell people, like, your question is good, but my answer for you is too valuable for it to be free. Like, it's funny in a sense, right? But that's that's how I look at it. But I'm, again, trying to imagine as if I were to enter this hobby, just fresh. And how would I go down that rabbit hole? And what would the steps be? And sure, that's just YouTube. And then you can talk about, like, okay, you make your way over to probably like E4, I'm guessing. Maybe you get into some Discord groups. Maybe you start to, build relationships with different people. But then a lot of the hobby, especially if you're re-entering, would probably be for two reasons. One, as a collector, but number two, as an investor. And to be an investor, at some point, in order to see a return, you can't be an investor forever. You gotta, at some point, become a seller. And I think that's where a lot of people will get hurt eventually in the long run too, is becoming a seller. Because at the same time, and I've said it before, there's also a lot of gatekeeping that happens with selling of Pokemon cards. And that might sound a little crazy too, but there are artificial barriers of entry when it comes to selling cards that I think it might end up scaring away a lot of people. But if you really start to dig into it, selling Pokemon cards is not hard. It is actually very easy. I think the problem is a lot of people just see highest prices sold. And if you only are blinded by highest prices sold, and that's all you could focus on, is you just have to be the highest seller of a item, yeah, I can see how that could be really hard. And but then it runs into a lot of like these different slippery slopes, like the whole argument of racing to the bottom and stuff like that, and auctions versus buy it nows, and why do some auctions sell more than buy it nows? But I don't want to get into like those details, but I feel that could be a barrier for a lot of people, because they either got into cards for way too high, or they're maybe in over their head on some of these, or they've made mistakes along the way. But if all that stuff happens, you would have just such a uphill battle. But at the same time, when I thought about this hobby and I really tried to break it down and think about the two original questions that I originally wanted to ask, the one question being, if I were to start from scratch, what would I need? And originally that was a dollar amount. That was the first thing I thought of. Could I do it? Could I like make a clickbaity video? How can you turn $100 into $100,000 in the Pokemon hobby? But you can't do that. I don't know how to do it. I can't tell you how to do that. That's too hard. And you want to know why? Because the only thing you really, really need is patience. And I don't know how to teach patience. Because at the end of the day, when you really break it down to, how to be successful in the long term of this hobby, yeah, you got to go through all those new steps that new collectors probably did. But at the same time, I don't really even know the steps that a lot of people did. And a lot of that is because of the money that was thrown out there too. People threw out money like it was going out of style. And don't get me wrong, we live in 2021. Probably hyperinflation's right around the corner. Yeah, maybe money is going out of style. But at the same time, like, I saw so much of that going on. And that's why at the end of the day, the only way you can ever be successful, the only way I could start over would be to just be patient. And that's why to really talk about, okay, back to the topic of the video, how would you do it? How would you start over again? And I don't know how to answer that question without just saying, I'd be patient. Yeah, it would probably take years and years and years to get back to anything even close to where I am right now in the hobby. But I couldn't figure out a way to do that without just patience. Sure, if you had just a limited amount of money and a blank check, maybe you could do it in a day or a week, or just, you know, buy out eBay or whatever you want to do, do some crazy stuff. But I feel like that's what we might have saw. And, another thing about the hobby too, which if you got to do it over again, at this point, there's so many little things going on at all times in the hobby. A million different little pieces happening at one time. And, I don't write things down. A lot of the stuff I do is all in my head. I'm planning out steps ahead. Sometimes I'm planning stuff out a month ahead of time. Sometimes I'm planning it out a week. Sometimes I'm planning it out months. Sometimes when it comes to a lot of these graded card submissions and some of these bulk submissions and stuff, I'm starting to plan stuff out for years in advance. I don't know what the Pokemon hobby is going to be in a year from now, let alone 2 years from now, or, some of these turnaround times I might realistically start, experiencing. But that's just one little piece of all these little pieces moving around. So that's what it really just boils down to, is patience. Because in order for you to have a million different pieces going on, it takes a lot of patience, it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of money. That's why I always think about it, and it's an interesting conversation to have, and it's okay. Well, when people say, well, what is your collection worth? I don't know. Yeah, I told you I would say I don't know a lot in this video, and I don't know. So yeah, how silly is that? How ridiculous does that sound if somebody said, how much is your collection worth? If I said, I don't know what it's worth. I just don't know. And the question would be like, well, why don't you know? And the reason would be because I have so many little pieces going on in so many different areas. I got some product that I have sealed that I think is a long-term investment. I have some product that I think is a short-term investment. I have some booster boxes that I'm sitting on in the short term. Some I'm sitting on in the long term. I got, some vintage packs and vintage cards and cards away for grading, cards that are prepared for grading, cards that are waiting for PSA to open, cards that are waiting for, turnaround times to go down, and cards that are already at grading, cards that are at different grading card company. You know how much stuff that is going on? So it's not like I can just put a price to it because of all the pieces that are moving. Sure, if I really wanted to, if I could just break it down to current market prices, I guess I could do that. But how do I put a price on a graded card submission that's currently at PSA that I'm not going to get back for, 9 more months? How do you put a price on that? I don't know what those cards are going to grade. I got an understanding. I only ever sent high graded 9s and 10s at PSA, so I expect them to be higher grades, but I don't know, the difference between 9s and 10s on a lot of these cards. You're talking substantially different amounts of money. But it all boils down, again, guys, to just patience. And that's the only advice I could give you. If I were to rebuild or start over or do any of the stuff I talked about in this video, that's what it comes down to. It just comes down to patience. And I hope you guys are being patient, especially with the market right now. There's a lot of FOMO going on still, especially with a lot of these newer sets, a lot of the pre-orders going on. We are seeing prices drop in a lot of different areas. What can that mean for the long term? Are you a buyer at this point, or are you going to be a seller? And, does it make more sense to be a buyer? Yes. But at the same time, it's a valid argument to say, what if we haven't hit the bottom? What if this isn't the bottom? Should you wait? Should you wait for prices to retrace more? Are we seeing areas where prices are actually increasing? Why is that happening? What are the true fundamentals for that stuff? And, yeah, maybe we can do it on card-by-card basis, but to do it as a whole, or do it as a set whole, or do it as a whole for the hobby, it's impossible. There's just too much going on. You know why? Because there's little pieces moving around at all times in the hobby too. Just like you have pieces moving around, just like I have pieces, the hobby as a whole has a bunch of different pieces. But that's why you got to be patient. You got to be smart. You don't want to ever get taken advantage of. You want to always be at the top of your game. And the only way you're really going to ever get to the top of that game, top of the hill, top of the mountain, is to be patient. You know, be the best collector you can be. Yeah, it might sound cliche, it might sound stupid, it might sound childish. I don't care. It's the truth at the end of the day. But hey, guys, that was definitely a rant video. I tried to make it a fun video, but I don't know. I couldn't figure out an answer. But hey, otherwise, guys, listen. If you're new to this channel, and you somehow, and I don't know how you did it, but you did it, which is impressive. You made it to the end of this video. Do me a favor, go down below, hit that subscribe button. Other than that, if you guys are subscribed to this channel and you did make it this far, thank you so much. I appreciate the support. Do me a favor, hit that like button. Helps out a lot with the YouTube algorithm. Other than that, guys, I'll catch you on the next video.